Well, anytime an American president comes to Israel, it is an important day. But this one seems to stand out and will indeed go down in history. We're joined now by someone who follows all this very closely. Leslie Vinjamuri is the president and CEO of the Chicago Council of Global Affairs. She was also the former U.S. head of Chatham House in London. Leslie, I know you've been following all of the twists and turns. In terms of a visit by an American president to Israel, what stood out for you about today?
Well, I think, as we've been hearing, it was just an extraordinary visit because of the return of the hostages. I think for President Trump, he's certainly wanted to have this moment to be able to be there, to speak throughout, to really engage. And it's just incredibly clear the bond between Israel's prime minister and the U.S. president couldn't be stronger. And that's despite, as we know, President Trump putting a lot of pressure on Israel to really deliver this phase of the deal. And I think it's, for the president, remarkable. It's what he's wanted to see. And we all know that today is certainly a day for the families of those hostages, for Israelis, for people around the world, to be glad to see this. But we all know that what lies ahead is really the difficult part for Gaza, for the Palestinians. And now I think as we turn and look forward to what will happen in Egypt, everybody is waiting to see whether President Trump will stay the course. I think in his mind he'd like to, and certainly it's going to be critical. He certainly doesn't want to be the U.S. president that gets part of the deal, but then sees a return to war. But whether he will have that staying power, we know he's not staying in Egypt very long. He's returning home for domestic reasons. And so that, I think, is what people need to be watching now and are watching right now.
As you know, because you're in the United States, there is criticism that President Trump likes to bend the rules, break the rules, even trying to bend the U.S. Constitution. But when it comes to foreign policy, including policy in the Middle East, he has really been untethered from American foreign policy, as you know, which has been the norm for decades. He did it in his first term in office, and yet again, he is taking steps. It's been said that no other American president has taken before in exerting that kind of pressure on Israel, and in particular on Israel's longest-serving prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu.
Absolutely. And I think across the board, he deserves credit for that. As we understand, it comes on the back of his very significant dissatisfaction of the strikes on Qatar that really seems to have turned Donald Trump. I think I would argue that in the background, his lack of success to bring a deal between Russia and Ukraine, and his deep desire to really deliver on peace. Remember, this is the president that in his inaugural speech said, "Judge me by the peace deals that I deliver, by the wars that I don't enter into." He's really wanted to be seen. We know he wants that peace prize. But I think he also has an emotion and has had a feeling for the hostages. He has a degree of empathy that seems for many people to be out of character. But when he sees human suffering, the images, talks to families, he does feel it. And I think he wanted to see this peace. And then on the back of not being able to get Netanyahu to the table, not being able to get what he wanted, and then the strikes on Qatar, he really applied pressure that President Biden simply had not been willing to do, and that President Trump hadn't done until he then did and made a turn. And the question again is now what? What comes next? Will he continue to deliver Israel, to deliver actors in the region, and to keep the U.S. in? We've just heard the foreign minister of Egypt tell Becky Anderson that U.S. troops should be deployed in Gaza. That seems extremely unlikely. But there is a broader question, as we know, of what will the stabilization force who will participate in that, who will contribute, and will President Trump continue to apply that pressure on both sides to ensure that there isn't a return to violence, that Palestinians don't suffer in the days and weeks ahead as they have so extraordinarily for the last 2 years.
And as we speak to you, Leslie, we're seeing an image of a lounge where those leaders, 20 world leaders, Arab, well, that the images is gone, but Arab and Western leaders meeting there. We saw Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey, Giorgia Meloni of Italy, King Abdullah of Jordan, just a few of the many leaders who are biding their time, hopefully having important discussions, but as they wait for President Trump, who kept joking in the Israeli Knesset whether or not they would wait for him, but they would wait for them. Leslie, you're talking about how President Trump has to keep focused on this conflict, if indeed it is to move from the first phase to the even more difficult second phase. But I don't need to tell you how many issues on his agenda at home, in the region in which you live, and of course he also mentioned about trying to end the Ukraine war. But bring us into a bit of the insight about what is the mood in the United States. You'll remember that weeks ago, President Trump commented on that no other country had a lobby in the United States but Israel. But he was really struck by how Israel was losing support, even in the United States. Today, he exclaimed that was over, that Israel was now back, that it was popular again. How fundamental was this shift in relations toward Israel during this grievous Gaza war?
We've certainly seen, especially amongst younger generations of America, this war, as we've seen, triggered protests across U.S. college campuses, young people, Arab Americans. It certainly had an influence on some of the support that Kamala Harris might have wished to have in the last presidential election, people feeling that she was part of an administration that had been far too supportive of Israel in its war in Gaza. Young Americans dissatisfied, but really a shifting, and the public opinion polls have shown this, of support for Israel declining fairly significantly. Still strong support, one doesn't want to overstate that, but relative to what it had been. And those trends, had preceded the war. They were accelerated by what was seen to be Israel's ongoing attacks on far too many Palestinians, the number of deaths just being beyond the pale for many people, and it really outweighed for many Americans the just and rightful grievances and devastation that so many Israelis felt. Now, what happens? Certainly, the fact that the hostages have been returned, that there is a ceasefire, will affect opinion, but it really so much will come down now to what happens in the days and the weeks and the months ahead. Does that ceasefire hold? Does that peace hold? Is there an effort to rebuild Gaza, to treat the Palestinians with some dignity? And what ultimately is the solution for peace between Israel and Palestine? And I think that will undoubtedly affect how Americans here in the United States feel. President Trump will be aware of that. Whether or not it will persuade him to stay the course remains to be seen. As you know, he is flying home. He's only staying in Egypt, as I understand it, for a day. He's flying home to award a Presidential Medal of Freedom to Charlie Kirk, who was, of course, assassinated. He's very much focused on events here in Chicago, on his domestic agenda. And so he's torn in multiple directions. He's looking ahead. As he got onto the plane, he apparently remarked about his relationship with President Xi of China, the tariffs. So he's looking in all sorts of places. This is a president whose attention span, as we know, is short. But he has wanted to see this peace delivered. He wanted those hostages back. And to what extent he feels that need and that sort of commitment to Gaza, that is, I really think, uncertain, and everybody will be waiting to see. And he's got a shallow deck. He doesn't have a very deep deck of foreign policy officials. Those domestic agencies have been a bit hollowed out. So it will take a lot of work by the people at the top, the people surrounding the president, to really stay the course and work with regional partners to deliver some sort of stability for the region.
And what about in Congress, Democrats and Republicans? There was unprecedented criticism by some members of Congress, but they would, I would imagine, embrace the idea that we now hear so much more about, that the Abraham Accords, that bringing Israel, integrating Israel into the broader region, achieving that broader Middle East peace. Never mind that President Trump said, in a way, it's actually achieved, as you know, a long way to go. But would they also put that on their agenda, that it matters to the United States and, of course, it matters to the region?
Oh, absolutely. But again, just to remind our viewers of the domestic context here, the U.S. government is shut down. So there will be a focus on what's happening today in Egypt, the release of the hostages earlier today. But really, the overwhelming domestic focus here in the United States cannot be overstated. But certainly for the last 2 years, the politics, the war between Israel and Hamas has really driven divisions within Congress, within the parties, across the American electorate, and again, across those college campuses. But people will wish to see, those who have been especially critical of President Trump, they will demand and wish to see that there is follow through, that Gaza is rebuilt, that Palestinians can return and create new homes, that there is not a return to the violence, and that the U.S. stays committed. If President Trump can deliver on that very difficult, very ambitious, very important, essential agenda, then I think he will certainly receive a lot of credit. But in the U.S., it's certainly lined up against the multiple issues against which so many people have deep grievances. So very few people are single issue voters. There are certainly some, but on this profound question of peace and the prospects for peace and a lasting peace and reconstruction in Gaza, certainly he will win deep support if he can deliver.
Huge agenda. Today is a day to celebrate, great symbolism, great emotion, but a lot lies ahead. Leslie Vinjamuri, thank you for joining us, President and CEO of the Chicago Council of Global Affairs.